Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Tammy Thigpen, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I work with adults. I am not a child psychologist, so just want to throw that out there. However, I will say that ever since I had my son, I take parenting class after parenting class, which my friends can attest to. So today we're going to talk about mindfulness and self-regulation. So, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. Without judgment is the difficult part, and we'll talk more about that. The practice of mindfulness can help children be more self-aware, gain more self-control and focus. Mindfulness also allows children to learn how to see reality accurate, as well as noticing how they think, feel, what their experiences are. And it also teaches kids that feelings are neither good or bad. Feelings are just feelings. They are information from our body. So if you think about that definition, really awareness of our feelings is at the root of self-regulation. So we cannot regulate if we don't understand what's going on. So mindfulness also teaches children to be compassionate towards themselves as well as others. So here I'd like to play a video about mindfulness by Russ Hayes, who's a psychologist. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, oh. Yes.
What scientists are discovering is truly amazing. For example, a number of studies now show What scientists are discovering is truly amazing. For example, a number of studies now show that regular mindfulness practice actually changes the physical structure of the brain. After 8 weeks of regular mindfulness practice, brain scans show that the amygdala, which is the fight or flight center of the brain, actually shrinks. And this is good news because this part of the brain plays a huge role in triggering fear, anxiety, and stress. But that's not all. At the same time as our amygdala shrinks, the prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain at the front that's responsible for awareness, concentration, and decision-making, actually thickens. In other words, as the prefrontal cortex strengthens, so does our ability to focus and be aware and make good decisions. And that's not all. Mindfulness has been proven over and over to have a whole host of physical, mental, and emotional benefits, including lower stress levels, lower blood pressure, reduced chronic pain, better sleep quality, reduced depression, lower anxiety levels, less emotional reactivity, improved focus, a better ability to adapt to change, and overall greater levels of contentment and satisfaction in life. The great news is mindfulness is easy to do. We don't have to become a Buddhist monk or meditate for 40 minutes every morning. There are so many ways to introduce it simply and easily into everyday life.
So as you can see, I think we all want that for our children. So starting early is good. There are 3 mindfulness skills we can work on with kids that really sets them off on a good path. So first is having our children observe, notice with words, without words I mean, what is going on both externally as well as internally. So next we want them to be able to describe, name what is going on, and be descriptive in a non-judgmental way. So the best way I have found to kind of push judgment to the side is to replace it with curiosity. It's pretty astounding. Think about when you're curious about something. You are completely engrossed in it. You are really interested, and it brings you to the present moment. So if you can kind of put judgment to the side so that you can just be curious about what's going on, how you're feeling, how somebody else is feeling, it does a great job of pushing that judgment to the side. Next, we want them, to participate, to really learn to throw themselves into things. And my best example is dancing for joy. So parents, don't say things like, we can't dance in our family. That judgment, if you can push it to the side and just dance for the joy of it, that would be terrific. So be creative. As you can see here, I have a whole table, and I actually have more. I have done so many different things with my son, and he will love something for a while, it fades out. I bring something new in, or I try something different. So with this bell, we started out with a simple activity. I would hit it, and I'd have him close his eyes and tell me when the bell stopped ringing, because it lasts a little while. So he has to be in the moment, present. Next, it became if somebody needed to take some deep breaths in our family, whether it was Brian, me, or Lane, if we could see somebody was getting agitated, anyone could go pick up the bell, tap it, and we'd all have to stop where we were and take 10 deep breaths. So you can just be creative. One of mine and my son's favorite things to do is swing, and then I have us close our eyes and we just listen, and we take turns telling each other what we hear. And when you do that, you are in the present moment. You're calm, you're focused. One of our favorite things to do, and he will always do that. And now that I said that, he won't do it anymore, but so as you can see, there's a list. Another great one is music. So not just listening to music, but actually having your children pick out instruments. Okay, tell me how many instruments you can hear in this piece. And that really centers them in the moment. So now I'm going to talk about neuroscience. Our brains develop from the bottom up. So from the brain stem up. What's interesting is this is also how information flows. So as parents, what we often do is say there's a meltdown at Target. We get down and we try to reason with our children, right? But maybe. But guess what? We're trying to talk to the cortex of the brain. That is at the top of the brain. We actually have to be talking to the lower portion of the brain. They are in a primal state of fight or flight or freeze. And so in the next slide, you can see here's the lower brain. So the brainstem, that body brain, is basically our nervous system. It's taking in information all of the time. And so that's where it starts. Next is the feeling brain. This is where we have our emotions. It's the limbic system, which is pointing to the amygdala. And that's where our fight, flight, or freeze responses, the autonomic nervous system. As you go up, the blue part is the cortex, and that's the thinking brain. So we're trying to talk to the thinking brain, the logic part of the brain, and our children are down here. We need to attend to this before we can get them up to this portion. So one thing to keep in mind is that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the age about 25. So it's a long haul for us parents as far as teaching our kids regulation and socialization. So that area is the area for higher level cognitive functioning. So executive functioning, which is planning, organizing, decision making, social emotional skills, the higher levels of those, social awareness, empathy. It's also where a lot of our personality is housed. It's right there. So.
Tammy, before we get too far, so the meltdown at Target.
Yeah.
Well, what do you say? Because obviously saying, well, you know what, son, you only have $20.
Mm-hmm.
You want this $40 toy, like that's logic. So
Right.
that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So to speak to the stem or to the limbic part, what am I supposed to be saying?
Mm-hmm. So really, at that point, so you hope that you're not triggered, right?
Oh, I
Because,
totally
okay, right. Because,
I've got two of them triggered.
yes, so then we also have to deal with co-regulation as well. But what you want to do is speak to, can you go to the next slide? And no, one more. We'll have to go back. One more. Oh, it's there somewhere, but we'll go back. But what you really have to do is go down to that lower part where, for one thing, they want to have somebody connect with them, understand what they're feeling. So trying to validate their feelings because they're real. Feelings are real. They're not good, bad, they're information. So if, as a parent, you can be curious about, gosh, you're so upset. I see that. What do you think is going on? And just trying to have them feel safe. I get it. You're frustrated. You're angry that you can't get it. So what you're hoping to do is get them calmer so that then you can deal with the rational part. Much easier said than done, but you really do have to, unless you're just going to bring it down. Because they can't hear you. It doesn't matter who you are, adult, child. If you're in fight, flight, or freeze, your frontal lobe is offline. And so, especially for children, they definitely are offline. And so trying to speak to that just doesn't work. A matter of fact, what happens, it escalates because they need to scream louder if they're not being heard instead of coming down. So it's tricky. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
We were right here.
Yeah. Next one. So regulation is a learned skill. So kids are born with all the feelings, intensity of those feelings, but they have absolutely zero skills to manage them. And so we all know that, right? Obvious, but it's easy to forget. So I just really wanted to highlight that. So important considerations, I think. Feelings are mentionable. Please talk to your kids about their feelings. We come from a generation and past generations where we push feelings down, repress. I think it's so important because if you can talk about feelings, they're in touch with their feelings. It's easier to regulate, for one thing, because they have the information, but also you're teaching them that they're manageable, that they can have big feelings and they can learn to manage them. So you want to talk about that. Also, teaching them that feelings are simply information. It is literally your body giving you information. So you can make choices. So what is self-regulation? The ability to monitor and control our behavior, emotions, and thoughts, altering them in accordance with the situation at hand. So adjusting, transitions, those sorts of things can be really difficult for children. So I think somewhere it's out there that regulation equals calm. It doesn't. Regulation is really about being present with yourself, knowing yourself, listening to yourself, being connected with your thoughts, feelings, experiences. So it is a moment of mindfulness with ourselves in the midst of different states of being activated. So whether you're sad, mad, happy, and all of those feelings should be appreciated for what they are because they're valid. So we want to teach kids to tolerate their feelings, to know themselves. Okay, so the 3 R's of regulation, I think this is really important. So first, so this goes back to target. First step, regulate the body. Second, regulate feelings. Third, then you can get to reason. So in the first, when we're dealing with the lower brain and the body sensations, really a child's asking, their need is to feel safe. So our job is to make sure that they feel safe, to increase their feelings of safety. And next, we want to connect with them. So I'm here. I know you are furious that you can't get that toy. I get it. And then when they are calm, you can go back to the thinking brain because kids really do want to know, am I capable of dealing with that situation? So it might take practice, but that's when they're going to be open to looking at the problem and trying to figure out what's going on. So that's problem solving time, not right away. Yeah.
One of the things we've done with Gio, our son, kind of in that situation, is we give him a past point of reference, right? So one of the things I always tell him is control your feelings. Don't let your feelings control you. Okay? And so when he freaks out, I'll bring up a past example where he freaked out before and I'll make him walk through it. What was the end result? He was like, it was a bad result. I was like, okay, so were you controlling your feelings back then? No. So if you're not controlling your feelings now, what do you think the result's going to be now? Good or bad? Bad. Well, then let's calm down and let's go ahead and think this through. And then I'll let him.
Our Gio, he's so cute. He's so cute.
So, but yeah, I just give him a point of reference that I know will mean something to him.
Mm-hmm.
And go, had you thought through this differently, would you have gotten a different result? Yes, great. Why don't we try that now? So, but I put it on his terms. Your decision. You can choose this route, but be aware that there is another. Yep.
My daughter is a very physical regulator.
Okay.
Like she wants to kick and she wants to squirm, and that's very triggering for me. And so I have learned as she's gotten older that part of her feeling safe is me walking away because she will not feel safe because then I'll get mad and I'll yell, and then she spirals more. And so I just I'll like leave her. She'll be in her bed. She'll kind of like kick the end of her bed and rustle around and move around, and then I can come back. She does want the connection, but she has to get through whatever. She's very good at articulating. I don't know, I'm feeling this and this at the same time, and I don't know how to deal with it. But once she works through her little physical agitation, then we can.
So I grew up in a very Italian household. So let's just say we're not quiet. And so my natural go-to is to raise my voice and kind of overpower. None of that's good. I had a mentor one time. He was teaching helped me tremendously in those kind of situations now as a father. He said, leadership, all leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So if you influence me to think a certain way, whether you realize it or not, you're a leader, right? So he goes, the hardest, if you ever really want to test leadership, don't do it with your peers, do it with your kids. He goes, because if your kid acts up and you freak out, right, you get mad, who influenced who?
Mm-hmm.
So who's the real leader, right? I fail at that a lot, but it stays in the back of my mind. So before I jump, right, I remember, am I the leader or is my 6-year-old? And it brings me down a few
That's
notches.
the hardest.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It is.
it takes time. I'm still practicing it,
Yeah.
right, years in, but it brings me down a few pegs and allows me. I'm
It's
sorry.
25.
Yeah, but it allows me to take my own advice. I control my feelings. I don't let my feelings control me.
But see, I think of that in hindsight. I'm like, damn, I just let a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old set me off.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really did.
Like I said, I fail a lot.
I do, but and I think I
We all do.
blood,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, and then I'm like, oh wow, because I can see it in others, right? We see it in other human like where
Mhm.
you let your kid run you, and then I'm like, OMG, I just did that.
Mhm.
So I do try to be. That's my mindfulness, trying to be like, okay, because it starts straight first thing in the morning, right?
Right.
He wants to wear long sleeves, and it's like 10 degrees.
Yeah.
So or why does he have a hood and I don't have a hoodie? So
Mhm.
I'm just like, yeah, I'm just working on like,
Mm-hmm.
I think of Bill, it's gonna be make it a good day or whatever. You have the choice. And I'm like,
Yes.
I think it's being comfortable too with just being quiet. I think that's one of the hardest things for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Being patient and
Mm-hmm.
just being quiet, and that regulates a lot of kids as well. I mean, there's a lot of times kids are in the hallway having a meltdown and
Mhm.
just lean against the wall or sit down and
Mhm.
be quiet till they
Yep.
finish. But if you start talking, even if it's well intended,
Uh-huh.
they just aren't ready to hear that. So the quietness lets them work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're quiet, if you start to whisper, they're like, huh? What? And then they be quiet because they want to hear what you're saying. So
Yes.
it stops them from shining so much.
Yes.
But it's definitely hard with your own kids.
It is.
Like, well, especially in public, because it's embarrassing, right?
Right.
I'm great at doing this here at school.
yeah,
But then when I go
Yeah.
home to my own children,
Yeah.
it's your own children. That's
I can do
exactly
it
right.
so easily here at school with anybody
100%.
else's kids.
But that's
then
okay.
they say teachers' kids have like, are the hardest, right? Like they always say it's the hardest to like educate the teachers' kids.
No, they don't know.
Same thing like mechanics, right? It's always their cars that are broken.
Yeah. So what you guys are touching upon is very important, and I actually go into that in co-regulation because we have to be aware of what are our triggers? Why do we have them? The more we know ourselves, the more we can get regulated. So, very important. And then, as you were saying, the more wins you get, the easier it gets. And the truth is, neuropsychologically, what's going on is that route is getting deeper and deeper in the brain. Those synaptic, they're getting faster. So, growth mindset, right? Dysregulation, when emotions and urges being felt are greater than the capacity to manage them. So, I try to keep this in mind with our school-age kids, right? When they get to this point, they're at that capacity. So I like to say my son's amygdala, or mine, I'll be truthful, is hijacked. It's gone. Frontal lobe, again, offline.
I was working with a kid the other day, and when he's taking a test, he breathes, he gets toe shut down. He's like, it's like my brain's a computer, and I'm like sleep mode. It's like, this is great.
That is.
A lot of schools teach this too, is they'll do where they flip their lid.
Okay, well, I have the video, so you guys can see that. Because it's Dan Siegel is amazing. Yeah. So what is co-regulation, which we're talking about, right? The supportive process between parent and child, or teacher and child, or counselor and child, to foster the development of self-regulation. We are essentially the substitute prefrontal lobe for our kids. And I often think that's a big job. it's hard. It takes a lot from us to do that, especially when we're in public, right? Or a school incident happens and you're incredibly worried about that. So it's a big job. Parents have a big job. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure it's a warm relationship. They're in a stable environment, and to, when they get to the upstairs brain, to be able to teach coping strategies. This is what you guys have been touching upon, what we need to do as parents to co-regulate. So paying attention to our own feelings and reactions when we're stressed out by our children. And also, I think the second one is the hardest, is knowing yourself so much. You know what your belief systems are, where they come from. So a lot of our reactive reactions, are because of unconscious phenomenon. So how we were raised. So something, we may not consciously know it, but we might get triggered because that was not acceptable in our own home. So we go to fight and flight, freeze, and we're not making decisions with our cortex. We are at more of an emotional state. So understanding that those influences are there, and a lot of parents aren't aware of that, but they're significant. And then when we are triggered, we need to use strategies. So at this point, maybe for the last year, maybe 2 years, I really go through it with my son. If say it's bedtime, he's bouncing off the walls and I need him to calm down, I'll say, Lane, I'm really starting to get frustrated. I can feel it building. So I'm trying to point out body connection, how it's making me feel. So I usually give it like 3 times, and I'll say, okay, I'm so frustrated. I don't want to get angry. And so I'm going to leave. I need some space so that I can take some deep breaths. And then my plan is to come back so that we can work this out, because I want him to know the whole process. So we are constantly modeling for our kids. That's a lot. It's a lot to think about. But I think it's really good, because then they can start that process of feeling the body. That's what you do. You name it, you describe it, you come up with a plan, and then you decide how it will influence you, how you can make better choices by doing that. So I already said this, that we are lending our prefrontal cortex. And I just want to point out that kids, they are so smart. They know us so well. I always say my son knows me better than myself. And does that mean I'm done? And so they really are internalizing messages we're giving them, both consciously and unconsciously. Touch it?
Thank you.
It's good. Great. So again, just we are giving messages, and I always like to keep that in the back of my mind. What message am I giving? So I think there's an underlying question here for kids, and it is, or what do we want them to internalize? Am I a bad kid? They're asking. They had a meltdown. They know it was bad. They did something they shouldn't have. Or do I want them to think, I'm a good kid having a hard time? huge distinction. I think it's so important. So I think we need to ask ourselves, what do I want my child to internalize about himself? Okay, here we go with the
ultimate test
Yeah.
here, y'all. Let's see. I got the little thing.
One of the
This
most
is awesome.
rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a time.
I think it's essentially.
Okay, try to touch it again real quick.
Okay. I don't have the magic touch.
You did. You made the code.
Okay.
I'm going to send this video to my dad while I'm thinking about it.
So flip your lid. I know. I got it. It's lid too. Flip it.
Yeah, I flipped its lid.
Can't handle this. Okay. Got it.
I think it was almost over.
I think it was right here, right? Oh, wait.
That's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So I think it's
One
real
of the most rewarding-
helpful to teach children some brain science. I have a few books, but like this one is amazing at explaining what happens to you when you're anxious. And it's a fun book, so kids actually enjoy it. It's terrific, so much so that I have a story. My son was outside with me, and I was talking to a neighbor, and our old Golden, my poor guy, fell down 5 stairs he's 13. He was 13, and I was at the gate, and so I turned and, of course, panicked that he was really hurt. So after Lane and I had gone inside, he said, "Mommy, I saw your amygdala flashing." So, they really can take this stuff in and make sense of it. It's really cool. So the relationship between mindfulness and self-regulation, I think it was just explained well by Dr. Dan Siegel. But being mindful and noticing feelings in a non-judgmental way leads to better decision making. Sorry, I can't get that word out. When we slow down, teaching children to slow down allows them to be more thoughtful. We really have to work on this with my son. And it's partly mine and my husband's fault because we're quick people. But slowing down helps. So parents, remember to slow down, model self-reflection, self-awareness for your children, because sometimes parents are scared that if they show vulnerability, it will be bad. But it's the opposite. It helps our children learn. So this is kind of a funny graph, but I want to set you guys up with a good expectation. So I've noticed with my own son, as well as friends who do the same work with their children, that you're going to see things go up and down. Lane will be into yoga, mindfulness activities. He'll be into all of these books. He can't get enough of it. And then, bam, he wants nothing to do with it. I can do less formal stuff with him, like the swing and closing your eyes and listening for things. But I've learned to give that space, because what happens is you get surprised. You plant the seeds, and then suddenly they bloom. They really start to at least bud. So if you'll go to the next. This is me saying persevere, be creative, and believe that you are planting seeds. So what you're going to see, this is an odd angle because we were hiking, but my son was not into this stuff for a while. And we were hiking at Memorial Park, and he suddenly wanted to teach Daddy how to meditate. Completely random. And I was thrilled, of course. And so just a little video we'll play.
Let's close your eyes.
Just like that, huh?
Okay.
They will surprise you. They take it in. So have faith, be creative. This is another example. So my son has what he has called a calming tree. He had a play date that did not go well. He has known the other child since he was 6 months old, and it was a screaming meltdown on both ends. And so he was going to have another play date. And so he brought this in. He couldn't write yet. And he asked me to write, "This is Lane's calming tree for everyone to enjoy." Because he wanted to make sure that his friend knew that there was a place if he got upset to go to calm down. And so I thought it was very sweet. This calming tree is truly his little paradise. He climbs it all the time. And he has since I thought he was too young, but he's climbed it. Do you guys know about glitter jars, calming jars? Oh, if you're interested, I'll let you know. So what it's about is you pretend like all of these glitters floating around is our minds, right? We have so much going on. It's just chaos in there. So what the child does is they watch as it all settles and becomes clear and calm. And while that's happening, they become calm. So it's a really cool activity to do with your children. So he took this, it's all bent, dented because he put it between two branches. and it lives in the tree. So kids just will surprise you. So thank you, and namaste. Lane was doing yoga. It's time when he loved yoga. We're out of that for right now, but we will get back there. So thank you. And keep persevering. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's okay. Amazing.
Because it has like checklists for every age
It does.
band.
Yeah. So so the cheat sheet, I call it. So every time he turns a new age, a new range, I copy it so that I have it, so that I can refer to it when I'm frazzled, which happens a lot. So